Hey everybody, do you want to make a D&D podcast like us or really any podcast? Well, then you got to know about Anchor. First off, my favorite part, it's very free. It's the most free. It costs no dollars. That's sick. Second part, you can start monetizing with their monetization tools immediately with no minimum listenership. Also very sick. You can now, this is new. You can take any song from Spotify and add it directly into your episodes, and let me tell you, that's freaking sick nasty. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Lawful Stupid Community Highlights, where we bring in others from the community to discuss upcoming projects and more. I'm Devin, the DM of Campaign 3 that's going on now. I have with me today Dwayne, DM of Campaign 1. Say hello, Dwayne.
Hello, Dwayne.
I deserve that. And our guest today is none other than Douglas Cole. We're going to be discussing many things, but the focus of today's episode will be on specifically the Tower of the Moon product that has come out on Backerkit. And without further ado, hey, Douglas, how's it going, man?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us have you. We appreciate that very much for you reaching out to us, so we love doing this.
It's the thank you recursion. Recursiveness is good, right?
The infinite loop just keeps happening. Thankfulness. So we'll jump right in, Douglas, and so I want to start this thing out, and Dwayne, feel free. I have the template here, but feel free to interject whenever you want.
Ruin your plan. Got it? No.
Yes. We're going to start with, getting to know you a little bit, Douglas. So tell us a little about you. Where are you from? What's your day job? You mentioned that, before we jumped on what you're into now, and your family makeup, just kind of some of those things. And whatever you miss on my list, I'll be sure to ask.
Just circle around. That's right.
Yeah.
That's why we have an agenda. Anyway, so my name's Douglas Cole. I've been role-playing since I started with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons back in 1981 or so. I really got into playing different systems in high school, which for me finished up in about 1989. That's where, maybe everyone goes through it. Maybe it was just my friends, but you had the campaign week. Oh, here's the coolest game ever. We're going to make characters for this. Now, you never actually play said game. Maybe you do one episode. And then somebody else comes and says, no, this is the coolest game ever. So we covered, Lords of Creation, Bushido, Twilight 2000 First Edition, Champions, Fantasy Hero, Robot Warriors. All of those are hero systems. We eventually we played GURPS. That was my first introduction to it back in high school. Enough D&D that I was familiar with AD&D and the Red Box and Holmes and Beck Me and stuff like that. And just a bunch of other stuff. That was also the same year that I got my introduction to the West End Games D6 Star Wars system, which is still one of my favorite rules-light freeform game systems. So, I've done a bunch of eclectic stuff from gaming since a while ago. I went to got a couple of degrees in material science and engineering. I was a management consultant for a couple of years. And then I worked for a disk drive company doing process development, creating equipment for making the hard coatings on disk drives. That was actually the management job that I had, but I did grinding, I did lapping, anything that had to do with the disk drive head manufacturer, I probably touched on in a 20-year career. Got laid off, as many people did last year. But during that time, I had been playing around with Gaming Ballistic, first as a blog, starting in late 2012. And then I started publishing a bit in 2016, or that's when I started the company. I think my first product was later that year. And I talked to my wife, who's also a PhD in wastewater treatment, and I said, what if I decided to do this publishing thing for real and not thrash around looking for a day job? What if I gave it a year? And she said, okay, that's cool. And so that's kind of, I had some things to take care of as June went through December in 2020. I had some campaigns to finish up, and I didn't want to go all in all the time until I had done that. But when I had taken care of those things, on basically January 1 of this year, I said, all right, now gaming Ballistic is not just a hobby job, it's my only job. And I am just in a personal note kind of thing. I've got I'm outnumbered 5-1 in my house by my wife, 2 daughters, and 2 cats, all women. So there's that. And hobbies, I've been interested in martial stuff, and obviously with a company name like Gaming Ballistic, I have more than an academic interest in firearms. But right now, my thing is, and it reflects in the games that I'm making and writing myself, is sort of a Viking historical European martial arts. So when I sat down and read 5th edition, I was like, something about shields bugs me. But I'd never used one before. But it seemed to me that some giant slab of wood that you stuck between me and someone trying to kill me should move your hit chance more than 10%, plus 2 to armor class.
If you don't do that, I'm a guy who's just like, a shield, that sounds cool. It's protective, right? But you as a martial artist who actively engages in those events.
Well, that was the thing, is I had never used a shield before. It seemed to me to be true. But so as it happens, and I live in Minnesota, the land of the Vikings.
Are you a Vikings fan?
I never really grew up with my parents were a Giants fan and a Redskins fan. So Sunday football was just anger.
So we know what your traumas are. Got it.
Right, yeah, So I never really got into it. The joke that I do tell, though, is that I'm the kind of Viking that's actually conquered something in the last 1,000 years, as opposed to the football Vikings, which the purple ones are less likely to have conquered anything. My favorite bumper sticker I'm driving around. My favorite bumper sticker I'm driving around. So when I die, I want to be laid to rest by the Minnesota Vikings so they can let me down one more time.
Nice.
I'm a Packers fan, so that really.
There we go. Yeah.
That really.
But so that's the most common. The most common other common thing here is I'm a fan of the Vikings and whoever's playing the Packers.
So my first question, as I hear you talking. You said you hadn't dealt with shields, but you have now at this point.
Explain what that looked like.
Here's my question first before you explain it. Who was the person that you went to holding a shield and said, "Can you hit me with this flail?" or whatever it was?
Right.
I'm going to hold a shield. You hit me real hard.
Hit me with this. So what I wound up doing is there is actually a group here called Lawful, which is an historical Viking. We call ourselves we're not reenactors.
Okay.
Because that's a combat sport with very specific rules. What Oswald tries to do is use period proper equipment and clothing and weapons and whatever, and figure out how the Vikings might have fought. Nobody wrote anything down. The sagas of the Icelanders were written hundreds of years after peak Viking, right? They were written in 1100 to 1200 or whatever, right? So the people who recorded those, there's reasonable evidence because people have tried out the things that they describe and say, yeah, this actually kind of seems like it could be done. So the people who wrote the sagas seem to have known something about fighting, right? It wasn't like, like back when I was a kid, I would watch these Shopsaki movies and say, oh my God, these guys are so amazing. And then I went and studied hardcore martial arts for a while. And then I watched these same movies and I'm just like, oh my God, I cannot believe I ever thought that was good. Or whatever. Anyway, long story less long is they put a shield in my hand. And then over time, I learned how to build them in accurate.
Oh, that's awesome.
So if you want to buy a mostly authentic Viking shield, I build them and sell them for like $500 a piece.
Is that on your website or is that a different?
It is on my website. On my website. I don't highlight it anymore just because no one was. I mean, you have to really, really want a Viking shield to drop $500 on.
Well,
and
you don't realize how much I really want a shield.
Well, there you go. You can get shields for less, but they're usually too heavy and too thick.
Yeah.
Right, and so the actual shields wind up being like, I'm going to talk metric for a minute, but they're like 7 to 9 millimeters of wood at the core, and the wood tapers to like 2.5, 3 millimeters at the edge, and then they're faced and backed with hide or leather. And hide and leather, the way that they would tan the leather is a little weird, so it was either hide or kind of hide.
Yeah.
It wasn't like soft, right? It was like but the hide, hide facing and backing is like 0.5 millimeter each. So the edges of these things winds up being maybe 5 millimeters when you include an edge strip of rawhide, the facing, the backing, and the wood. these are really thin. And like, so I have a shield upstairs that I train with. You know, it's 6 pounds. It's not, and it's 34, 35 inches in diameter. So it's not terribly heavy.
Right.
And the way that the way that you hold it is not like you think. You know, you put it out in front of you, edge on, angled, and it more or less blocks all of the vision from like your knees to the top of your head.
Yeah. Because
of the cone that it blocks off. And so the more that and if someone swings, you're like, oh, well, I'll just swing a sword. Okay, sure. So I tilt the thing up and I present the grain of the wood. And, you know, especially when it was old growth trees, these tree rings are so tight, the sword gets stuck. And then you twist it and you basically use it as a grappling tool. You take it away and bam, and come in for the kill. So it's anyway, it was a whole world of fighting and movement and stuff, and, you know, a sword and a shield in each hand and whatever. And so now I make custom martial arts equipment, and I make these custom shields. Like I've made swords, like wooden training swords, for almost everybody in my school now, because I'm a woodworker. I love working with wood. Anyway, long story less long about that is I'm now even more convinced that +2 to armor class is, I mean, because the thing is, it's just not the way to go. Other than grabbing a spear and putting on a helmet, the first thing that you pick up for thousands of years is a shield. You know, you don't see or hear about a lot of people lining up with an axe and a sword. You know, the classic 2-weapon ranger, right? There were people who do that. But usually it was for either they had a lot of steel on them, so that was late period, or they were just really, really good. Like, I will say that having tried it, fighting with an axe in one hand and a sword in another is about the only thing that I would do other than a shield and something. Because the hooking with the axe is really cool.
Very useful, yeah, and it destroys your grip real quick. Hey, I'm gonna twist on this a little bit and talk about so you talk about shield and grappling, and so I'm gonna use this as a pivot segment to talk about this armada of content that you have. One of them is fantastic dungeon grappling, and what I like about this this content, and I'm not gonna give away all your trade secrets here, but I look through it because there's a lot of content here. So admittedly, I haven't read through every one of your manuals, but the grappling one stood out to me a lot because grapple is one of the most powerful effects in D&D 5e without these mechanics. And then you put this mechanic in here, these mechanics, and it just gives a lot of control, a lot of depth to the combat. So what I'm trying to say here is if you like combat and you like depth to combat, this is for you. If you like fighters, if you like grappling, I mean, even if you don't like fighters,
right?
It's just so interesting.
So the thing is, so dungeon grappling and fantastic dungeon grappling are the D&D and Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game versions of a system that my very first book was written for Steve Jackson Games called Technical Grappling. It was 50 pages of core organization, a lot of depth and content, but explained in a way that you needed to read the entire book like 3 times, and then you're like, oh, this is actually really simple. And over time, I refined it to where it started with the simple. That's called growing as an author. But basically, the point of that, the point of all of these systems is we if I told you, hey, fighting is complicated, I think you would agree. Right? Swords and, trying, it's in Zorro, they make fun of it. What? You put the pointy end goes into the other man. How hard can it be? But everyone understands that
There's way more
fighting
to
is
it.
complicated.
Yeah.
Way more to it. However, we accept, for very good reasons, that when it comes time to beat the bejesus out of somebody with a sword, you roll 1d20. Do you guys play mostly D&D?
Yeah, that's our
that's
primary.
everything.
I just want to use the idiom that you guys are in.
Yep.
So you roll 1d20 plus a bonus against a target number, an armor class or a DC or whatever, and if you hit, you roll damage. Okay, great. Yay, team! It's an abstraction, but it's a useful one. Okay, now we're gonna grapple. Everyone groans. Some people put their heads down on their desk. The game master takes a huge sigh and says, "Okay, we're grappling now." So, because there was usually some weird flowchart or some alternate rule that made it, grappling is so hard. Well, sword fighting is hard too, and there's a lot to it. But so if you're willing to accept the abstraction that goes into sword fighting, not only should you embrace it for grappling, you should do the same thing. 1d20 plus a bonus, and in 5th edition, the bonus that you're doing is the athletics proficiency, against some sort of difficulty that doesn't have to do specifically with how much armor you've laid on. Because I don't care how much, I have a chainmail shirt. It's not going to help me against grappling because it's flexing and bendy and whatever, right? I've seen people do gymnastics in plate harness, right? It's only
those are
about
good
50
friends
pounds,
to have.
Yeah,
and it's right. It's video, but but I've seen people doing chin-ups and burpees and all kinds of stuff in full plate harness. Yeah, you need to be strong, but if it's designed to fight in, you have to be able to move.
Yep.
Because the most important thing is to not get hit. Always in life, right? best block, no be there, right? Right. So the thing is so what I wound up doing is saying, okay, well, the grapple DC has more to do with your dex and your training. Right? So if you have the right feats, so it's kind of your, 10 plus a dex bonus, blah, blah, blah. But if you exceed the grapple DC, then go ahead, roll damage. It's just that the damage type is control. And the more control relative to your foe's strength, the more they're impaired. And in 5th edition, with the wonderful inclusion and leaning on conditions rather than penalties, you go from unencumbered to grabbed to grappled to restrained to incapacitated, right? And then the other thing I said is, if you want to, if you've reached certain thresholds, or if you want to, you can spend these control points to do cool stuff, right? So if someone tries to hit you and you've got them in the clinch, and someone's going to throw an elbow or something, you can say, okay, I'm going to spend some of my control points to raise my armor class so that you can't hit me for this round. So you're moving them out of the way, moving yourself out of the way. You're making them have to work harder than they would. But then those points are gone.
Yeah. Okay.
And once you've spent them, like, now you're free or whatever, right? So, and of course they can grapple you back and either pile up control on each other, which is what you see in some of these more interesting or not so interesting, like BJJ matches or two MMA where you've got two really good grapplers and they're just tied up. And you're like, and a good grappler would be like, oh, he tried this, and oh, he did this. And like, if you're watching it as a good grappler, you can see all the cool things that they're doing.
Yeah, the slight movements. Yeah.
Right. It's like, my friends, like my mother, actually, she'd be like, I can't understand how anyone watches tennis, as all they're doing is hitting the ball back and forth. Right? Or people who say, I can't understand why anyone would want to watch golf, is all they do is hit the ball straight down the fairway every time. I'm like, well, yeah, it takes an awful lot of skill to do that, and that's what you're watching is
true,
right? To see, where do they take the risk, where do they not? And but you don't want a role playing game to have the same reaction as, why are we even doing this, right? So it needs to have some give and take. But I really like the don't invoke a different mechanic. use what's there. D&D 5th edition was nicely simplified and streamlined in the mechanics. So 1d20 plus a skill against a grapple DC, and then roll damage. Oh, you're a monk. Add your martial arts damage. That's what you do.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of thing, right? And so 5th edition makes a wonderful pegboard to hang that kind of thing off of. And my dungeon grappling book was actually my very first Kickstarter, because I was familiar with it, I had written it, I had played with it. We had simplified it for OSR in Tim Shorts' Manor number 8. Me and Peter Del Orto co-wrote that. It was like 1,500 words. And I was looking to publish Dragon Heresy, which is my giant 5th edition, let's call it what it is, fantasy heartbreaker. But I was going to do that, and I had written like 400,000 words, but I talked to an industry pro. And you have to understand, this is right after the SRD came out, so a lot of those words were really stats and stuff that
apply to the SRD,
apply to the SRP, right? So you're allowed to reuse those. But all the fluff text, all of the new content did come from me. Anyway, point is that I asked for some advice from industry pro, and he came back and said, well, I really don't like to give advice because no one wants to take it. I'm like, lay it on me and I'll take it. And he says, okay, you're stupid. Don't do this. Don't do this first out of the gate because you will fail. Yeah. No one is going to drop money on a first timer with basically 3 250-page books because, dude, I mean, there are people who try and publish a zine or something that can't bring it to life their first time out. You're going to need 150, whatever you think you're going to need 3 or 4 times more. And now that I've done this a dozen or more times, he was absolutely right. I would have needed $150,000 just to bring that much content. Well, it winds up being between $150 to $250 a page.
Yep.
And there were 800 pages. So, and then you have to, that's just to get to the PDF. That's not making money.
Yeah.
That's just the checks you have to write. So, and then you have to print it, which is not the biggest cost. The biggest single budget item is almost always art.
Yep, art.
Oh man, yeah.
100%.
That's killer.
Of that $150 a page, you're probably spending $90 a page on art.
Yep.
About 60%.
Yep. If not more.
And if not more, that's right.
Yep. 100% agree.
Yeah. So anyway, so long story less long on that one. He's like, don't do that. You set yourself up for success, not failure. And I'm like, if I'm going to ask a pro, I might as well take the pro's advice. So I shelved the plans to do that and published Dungeon Grappling instead. Got a couple hundred, like 350 backers, maybe $6,000 or $7,000, broke even, on budget. Backers got it early, victory, whatever you want to call it. But it was the step that I needed. And honestly, that first book called Dungeons and Grappling, is probably my best seller. It came first. But every month that goes by, 1 or 2 more copies get sold here and there. It's on drive-through, stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So I want to move us along to the Tower of the Moon, because that's why we're here. But before we do, real quick, I just want to mention this Grappler book again because it's super good. There's an ability called Frog March in there, which equivalently lets you use another person as a shield, which I just find so narratively sweet. So if you didn't think the grappling was cool before, imagine just grabbing a dude and using his body as a shield.
Will we see that in campaign 4?
You're gonna see it in 3 if I can fudge the DM into doing it. You know what I mean? I'm a strength boy. We'll see.
Before you jump into I want to talk about one thing because this is really true. I've never done, and Douglas, you have 3 of these, at least 3 of these that I know of that you have on your site there.
Yep.
Solo D&D solo adventures. Now, many of you
they're a fantasy trip.
Fantasy. So this is what you call a market segment for fantasy trip.
Yeah, the system that is for Steve Jackson Games' The Fantasy Trip, which was published originally in 1980, was out there for a bit through Metagaming, and then when that company folded, the IP rights went into limbo, and Steve Jackson reacquired those rights within the last decade and brought forward into life the Fantasy Trip Legacy Edition, which is a box relatively the size of a shipping container, filled with. It's a huge box. I swear to God, it's just huge. The only thing that's bigger is this Steve Jackson, the Ogre box set. If you've ever seen that, I don't want to waste our time, but my fantasy trip box is out in the hall. But it's huge. It's got to be a foot tall. It's got to be 6 or 7 inches wide and 8 or 9 inches deep. The thing is just massive. Anyway, it's full of content. But TFT is a rules light skirmish game with a role playing system that evolved out of the skirmish game. So it's a game that you can sit down with your friends, kill each other for 30 minutes over lunch, put it away, and you're done. And that was the melee and wizard kind of tournament combat, whatever you want to call it. But it also supports a role playing game. And it's like, character generation can be done on these little 3.5 by 5, 3.5 by 5 inch cards. You take 32 points and assign them to 3 attributes. You grab a weapon and then fight. Right, and so it's designed to be the kind of thing that you can just play. So that's one. It's new school because the Legacy Edition came out within the last few years, but it's old school because it was one of the first fantasy role playing games that came up in that early '80s period.
Well, and I was reading through Dragon Hunt just as one to name.
Yeah,
it's already so fun because it just takes you paragraph to paragraph. You make decisions along the way. You have a character you go through. As you get certain, what they're calling, what do they call them? Not code words. Plot words. Like, if you have this plot word as you've gone through, you can make this alternate decision or gain this. And so, very cool thing. If you're listening to this, would direct you, and we're going to put the site, of course, in the show notes. But it's gamingballistic.com, and check out some of those as well. If you, I hear people all the time in our Discord say, I don't have anybody to play with. Like, right. I can't get anybody to play D&D with. I want to play blah blah blah. This is for you to be alone and still be excited about playing a fantasy role playing game.
That's right, and especially in as we get out of and maybe back into lockdowns and stuff, depending on where you are. If you can't find a group to play online with, or if that's just not for you, the 3 solos, they're all written by David Pulver so far. They're hard to write.
It looks
not
like
something
it.
You can just do. So it's Steve Jackson Games actually pays a premium because now there are other solos for the fantasy trip that and some of them are still written by David, but there are other solos that Steve Jackson Games publishes. The 3 that we're talking about happen to be the ones that David wrote for me. Vampire Hunter Belladonna, which is a great place to start. Dragon Hunt, which is kind of a test to destruction. It's hard. I was telling before the show, we were talking about it. When originally we're like, oh yeah, take a character through Dragon Hunt, and I sent it out for some playtest. And people immediately reported back that they just got the floor wiped with them. The dragon just used it for a toothpick.
It looks very hard.
And so we said, okay, we'll try 2 characters. And we're like, oh my God, it's still hard. And so we said, okay, take all 3 of the pre-gen characters. And then it started to become more of you expect to maybe have a good chance of winning. But James Isert on one of his shows went through Dragon Hunt with the 3 characters.
Oh, cool.
And got killed 2/3 of the way through. He didn't even reach the big bad, so that's a nice thing. We actually deliberately make the solos hard because you want replay value. Right?
Yeah,
you want replayability.
Right. So you want to be able to explore and you want to take it. So all of them wind up being challenging, and they could go either way. Dragon Hunt is hard enough that it can, if you actually have a group with a referee who knows the rules and 3 friends.
Yeah.
You can play it, and it actually makes a great tournament adventure for the same reason, because the game master can run several people through it, or turn down the power level of the characters and have more people go through it, and run it, and you just go from place to place and you have choices. I mean, convention adventures tend to be a little railroady anyway. I don't say that as a complaint. It's just you've got a very fixed amount of time with people you probably met before, so you want your challenges to be planned out. I've run freeform, almost hex crawl at a tournament which is great if you wrote this. If you wrote the setting, you know the history and can wing it,
Yep.
which I did. I ran Citadel of Nordborn at a convention. Then that's great. You can do it and you can make stuff up and fine. And many game masters have the chops to handle that. But a lot of, when I ran Lost Hall of Tyr, actually it wasn't Lost. Yeah, Lost Hall of Tyr at Gen Con 50. It was, it started off life as a convention adventure, basically a little railroad. I like to think of it as a roller coaster. You know what you're getting into with right? A roller coaster, you pay your money, you know what you're getting into, and you know the thrills are coming, and yay, you thrill. A railroad, you just sit back and say, all right, are we there yet?
Yeah.
Anyway, so to your point, the solos are a lot of fun, very timely, given that a lot of people are finding themselves without gaming groups. But it's something, because of the paragraph nature, you can start, and if you're like, oh, I have a phone call, or oh, my baby just vomited all over the floor, or oh, I need to help my daughter with my math homework, you can put it aside.
Come back to it. That's great. Yeah, so I'll be playing that as some extra content for sure. Let's transition, Dwayne, on over to Tower of the Moon. Why did we come here? This is why we're here.
Yeah, this is what we're talking about. So, Tower of the Moon, not only having a cool ass name, just from what I see, and I want you to give your spiel on it too, but you open this book, and the first page is a layout of a tower with multiple floors, and it's got this wizard-esque tower feel. And man after my own heart, like the entrance is like a wolf mouth, which just all kinds of love for that. So give us your 60-second, here's the premise of the tower, because I've got questions and things I'm going to highlight. But I want to hear your primer for it.
So the elevator pitch is Tower of the Moon is written for the Fantasy Trip and Swords and Wizardry. They are two separate books. The Swords and Wizardry version was published a while ago by Thomas Denmark and David Pulver, who wrote it. And we re-edited and republished it for my Tower of the Moon campaign. For the Fantasy Trip, David converted it. We redid the map because it uses hexes instead of squares. So we redrew the map. It's still the same, but there's some slight differences. Yeah. But in any case, Tower of the Moon is a gothic horror adventure that fits best as a side quest as you are traveling between two places. You're going from important place 1 to important place 2. You're crossing a wilderness. You come to a town, and oh look, damsel in distress, the noble's daughter, heir to the manor or whatever, has been kidnapped. We haven't seen her, and the house major domo is looking for brave souls who will go rescue the princess. So it leans on some of the classic tropes. She's actually not a princess; she's just a noble woman. But it leans on some classic tropes. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. As you might expect, you got moon, right? Tower. So you got magic. You probably have some wolves. Maybe werewolves. Werewolves, they're wolves. Anyway, it's designed as a horror adventure, and couple of good save or die things in there. So you can you might expect to lose a few people if your strategy is Hulk smash. Anyway, it's a really neat, self-contained little adventure that we got a chance to publish and review. So it's a lot of fun. The people who have read it and given me feedback have really enjoyed it.
So primer in mind, I'm page 3, right? And I'm a big fan of references. I'm a big fan of puns, even though I'm terrible at coming up with them. But the first thing you run into is Geralt the Butler. And all I hear is Geralt Butler immediately. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. I love stuff like that. It's.
I actually don't know if it's intentional.
It works.
David is not necessarily. Well, he's a pretty good at puns. He's got some, like many gamers, he's got some references in his head that like only he's gonna get, and
Mhm.
some like you will never see him drop a reference to Friends.
Dang it.
That's just
Love
not his thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
He's out for Devin.
but yeah. Anyway, yeah. Travolta Butler.
Well, I immediately saw Gerard Butler, and I can't say anything. One of the main things in Goron is the Red Roof Inn, 100% a real place, 100% now a real staple in my campaign because my brain silently pulled it in. But I mean, so this tower here, one of the cool things that I'm seeing about this, and it is essentially the who's who of a monster mash. As you go through this, it is brilliant. Like I don't want to give away everything, but gosh, I'm like, you go from the badass hero butler to, you've already said it, werewolves. I mean, it's
you got slimes in here.
It's
Yeah.
really good. Like I'm careful not to just fucking rattle them off because there's so many good ones. But you go through these different floors, and they're marked up really well too. And that's one of the biggest things I hate about pre-generated campaigns is if you can't understand it on the map and you're reading through it and you're like, well, where does that make sense? Then it's
Right.
just it's a pain for you and your players. But this is labeled out really, really well.
Yes.
It's written really well. It it makes sense like how you're supposed to run it. And especially because it's contained. It's not sprawling, it doesn't sprawl. So like my honest to goodness advice is if you've never really gotten into an adventure and you want to use this system, this is a great one to run because it's so simple of a concept that you don't have to worry about, oh, well, what if they go this way? They can.
They
They
can't.
can't.
Lock
Yeah,
in.
right.
You go
It's,
one direction, mostly one direction. And so like that's money especially for a new group. I mean, this probably will be really challenging for a new group if you put them on pre-generated characters, but they'll see a lot of cool stuff, and I guarantee you this is the way to do it. A lot of people say Minds of Phandalar for D&D is like one of the best first campaigns. Fuck those people. give them fucking what is it? Dragons Treasure. God, I'm blanking so hard on it.
Dragon Hunt?
No,
what are you
not
talking
Dragon Hunt.
I was like, yeah, go Dragon
the
Hunt. Do it again.
D&D well, absolutely. But the D&D campaign, and I'll just pull up the source. Why am I?
Rise of Tina?
Yeah, that is exactly what I'm looking for. But why?
Oh, yeah, some Tyranny of Dragons.
No, I mean, I think you're right. It's Rise of Tiamat, and I'm just why my brain fell apart pulling that together. But Horde of the Dragon Queen. Gosh, there we go.
There you go.
Horde of the
I got
Dragon
you,
Queen.
man. I could fix this.
Yeah, you fixed that in editing. I don't even care. Leave it. This is Lawful Stupid. We stand to our name.
You're right.
But
people know us.
People always talk about Minds of Phandalar and say it's really cool. Horde of the Dragon Queen. And here's why I say this, and I'll bring it back around. Because it's fucking cool, right? It's a battle, and there's dragons, right? That'll hook most people in. So you talk about Tower of the Moon, man, you got werewolves. You've got fucking skeletons. You've got slimes. You've got a cacophony of monsters in here that are going to fuck people up, or you're going to murder. Either way, it's exciting, and that's what you want as your first adventure. That's what hooks people in. Because I'll tell you right now, nobody's coming back going, oh yeah, I played D&D and we shopped for an hour. And while that's important, that is not going to get people in a game. They are not coming back. Like, I don't give a shit. I'm not converting gold pieces.
So you're saying last episode when I did that, you guys didn't like it?
Well, I'm here for 4 years. I'm stuck. I'm stuck.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
Explore the sunk cost fallacy.
100%.
Sunk cost. We're getting some real economics. Well, and then what I had never heard of as I was kind of reading through your material is Backerkit. So like, as opposed to Kickstarter, where you're trying to get this thing off the ground, man, it's already in flight. It's already made, and now you're saying here's the product.
It was an experiment. Thus far, I would say the experiment. So here's the deal. Kickstarter, the way that it is supposed to be used, I don't think it is used that way, but it is the way that it's supposed to be used, is I have a dream. If you build it, they will come, all that great stuff. You are looking to do something and are collecting money to enable you to do it. However, as you go to Kickstarter, as I go to Kickstarter, you are looking for signs that this product is more than vaporware and will be delivered. So what are you looking for? You're looking for a track record. Okay, great. What you're looking for is, what are you going to get? Is it worth it? And the way that you usually look at that is you would like to see screenshots. This is a mock-up of what you're going to get. This is page 9 and 10, or maybe it's 8 and 9, depending on how your spreads work. This is page 9 and 10, and here's some, preliminary art, or here's some introduction, or whatever. So you're looking for something that says the showrunner knows how to run the show. They have something that you're interested in, and it's not going to show up like a bunch of number 2 pencil stretches on college ruled paper with some stick figures. Now, my art direction is stick figures, but if you've seen the TFT Tower of the Moon, you can see that, Billy did a great job, and Billy Blue did the art on the TFT version of Tower of the Moon. Thomas Denmark did the maps on both OSR and the TFT version. I think Thomas also did the interior art. He's of the OSR version. He's an artist as well. And David wrote both. In any case, the point is that Kickstarter is, you run it for a couple of weeks. You want to have a couple of, although Phil Reed has played with one-day Kickstarters before, but he has a following of several thousand people.
Wow.
So, but the thing is, Kickstarter's fulfillment capabilities are meh.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you don't know what your shipping is going to be, you don't know whether you're going to have 50% international or 5% international. You don't know what stretch goals are going to be. Oh, look, if we get to stretch goal number 6, I'll throw dice in. Great. You can no longer use media mail, and your prices for that £1.50 of stuff have just gone up by a factor of 2. Right? So Backerkit allows you to do a lot of that retroactively. And however, Backerkit also has some really neat stuff in it. One of those things is every add-on can be treated as a stretch goal. So I talked to Thomas. We're like, hey, would you like to re-edit and reissue a physical version of Tower of the Moon for OSR, because they didn't have one. They just had PDF. I'll take care of the printing. I'll run it through my usual thing. I've got that down. I'll distribute it, whatever. But would you like to do this? Yes, I would. I do the math. Well, we really need to have 20 or 30 orders before it's really worth doing, before the cost per book. And I use a Mixum, which is a short-run printer. So they start off pretty good. But in order to return enough money to Thomas and David to make it better than, hey, here's $1, we said, hey, if as long as we get past like 6 or 10, we at least break even. If we get to 20, there's maybe $100 in it for you or something like that. It's not much, but considering that their PDF is $5 or whatever, it's the equivalent, and especially if it's on drive-through, $5 turns into $3 pretty quick, right? Mm-hmm. So, $100 is like, hey, I sold 30. Is that exciting to you? Yeah, it's exciting to me. Great. So we said, all right, so you can basically say, if you get this many orders, this add-on unlocks. So it's like a stretch goal, but every individual product can be judged on its own merits right there in the thing. So what I'm going to do, and this gets to the international shipping thing, shipping internationally is just a pain in the butt right now. I don't want to digress, but let's just stipulate that it's 10 times worse than it's ever been, both in cost and hassle. And that's complicated by Brexit and all kinds of other things. That's even beyond COVID, right? Brexit would have complicated things even beyond that. However, I can print Tower of the Moon in the United Kingdom with Mixum, ship it almost what seems like down the street to Crichton, where Kickstew is, and deliver within the UK using Royal Mail. That's like doing it all in the US for US people. So what I can do is I can put my entire freaking product portfolio on Backerkit. I can't do this on Kickstarter, but I can do it on Backerkit, and people can just buy stuff. And as each one unlocks, I can say, okay, when it comes to the end of this campaign, anything that's crossed the threshold will be charged and delivered. Anything that is not, we take that product off the list. You are not charged for that product, but I don't have to take a loss.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I want to try that, and I can do that in the UK. I can do it in Australia, New Zealand, and in another month or so, I think there's a printer who's going to do a short run digital press in the Netherlands, which will take care of the European Union.
Oh, nice.
What I can't do, what I can't do is this bad boy, 288 page hardback, blah blah blah. This still requires an honest to God print run, and that's still hard. 128 page softcover, like my Citadel at Nordborn, Hall of Judgment, Lost Hall of Tears second edition is 112 pages for D&D. That's my whatever. So those 96 to 128 page softcovers are going to require a lot of people to want them to be profitable. It's the 16. Basically, if you're in the realm of saddle stitch, so up to about 48 pages, that kind of short run printing rocks on toast.
That's I did not know that. It's very interesting.
Noted. I like that.
Yeah. We're always trying to see if we can get something published from Lawful Stupid. We've yet to do it, but we have. Dwayne writes quite a bit. Shane writes quite a bit. I would love to, but I'm not going to ever be here. So that's really awesome. Well, cool, man. We thank you so much for coming on. I learned a whole lot today, from being able to be a Viking martial artist to what it takes to get something printed and how you can save money by using Backerkit instead.
So Kickstarter has great community building tools and great customer communication tools. Backerkit, even though they have their launch thing, that's more of a marketing tool, it's like a mass mail. So I'm probably running half the customers that I usually do on a Kickstarter. So it's not.
It's young.
A bed of roses.
Yeah, so it's kind of just
it's not a bed of roses.
What you're trying to get out of it, and it makes sense for someone who's already got a product out to do that.
Right. So.
Well, Tower of the Moon seems like a really cool thing to do. I mean, honestly, we do themed. We played Final Girl as one of. It's like a TTRPG we play for Halloween, but doing a Tower of the Moon seems like a cool themed Halloween idea. So other podcasts who listen to us, I'd steal that idea. Go get Tower of the Moon and run that as your one-off Halloween. It's yours. You have to go buy it, but then after that, it's yours. So, lastly, real quick, Douglas, if you can tell people, besides, of course, the website, which again, in show notes, and also for this is gamingballistic.com, specifically Tower of the Moon. We'll put that one in there. Where else can they find social medias, that kind of thing? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook as Gaming Ballistic. I'm also on Facebook as me, but really, if you're interested in my gaming stuff rather than pictures of my children and cats, you want to go to the Gaming Ballistic page. I am on Twitter, GMing Ballistic, because for whatever reason I couldn't fit gaming in there. And technically I'm on Instagram, but I'm really bad at it.
Are you still doing TikTok dances and stuff? Are you still doing those?
No one on this planet, including my children, wants to watch me dance.
I feel like because they don't, that should be the reason why you do it.
Yeah, that's the goal. So let me see your TikTok. I'll use it.
Yeah, I'll be the dad equivalent of lightsaber.
You just have 100 videos, but it's all the same dance, just a different shirt.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool, Douglas. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Dwayne, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add on there before we close out.
No, I mean, thanks for writing the content, honestly, because there's people out there that just don't like homebrewing. But they want to have an imaginary setting, and having people out there create that content and go through the fucking hassle to publish it. I appreciate that very much. So thank you.
You're a hero in the community.
Thank you for saying so. At Gaming Ballistic, the one thing that the authors who work with me sometimes bristle at is my no homework rule. If you're paying Gaming Ballistic for stuff, you're not allowed to give the game master homework. That's why they're paying us.
Yep.
So if you throw a monster in, put stats. If you Don't say, "Oh, make up a rumor, give a rumor, a rumor table," right? Don't assign the game master homework, especially don't assign the game master homework in the middle of the adventure.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Devin loves that especially.
I love that. Hey, everybody, so go check out gamingballistic.com today. Again, we're talking about Tower of the Moon mostly, but so many cool things to check out, so many PDFs you can get. Again, we're pitching this Tower of the Moon. And so, real quick, that has, is it a soft cover for that, or what is that one?
Yep. Tower of the Moon is a soft cover.
Okay.
Soft cover saddle stitch, so it's stapled.
Saddle stitch just sounds cool. I know that's probably just a term you use.
Saddle stitch sounds way cooler. I will never call anything stapled again. Saddle stitch these two for me.
Yes.
Thank you. That 100%. That's awesome.
Yeah. Again, thanks, Douglas. Appreciate you, and hope to be talking to you more in the future, man. Just if you need, lean on Lawful Stupid for whatever you need. We'll
Absolutely.
We'll take
Day talking about gaming is a good day.
All right, well, everybody, thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you learned a little bit something about that. Go support Douglas. Go support gamingballistic.com. And until next time, we love you.
Bye.